A Russian spy ship just aimed a laser at British military pilots over UK territory. The UK's response? An immediate, direct warning to Moscow and a threat of military action. This isn't a headline from a spy novel. It's the true, explosive story of the Yantar. An encounter so brazen it marks the most provocative face-off between Britain and Russia in years. We need to talk about why a single, blinding beam of light in the North Atlantic might be the opening shot in a much bigger global game. Let's dive into the details. The date, November 18th, 2024. Location, north of Scotland, high above the icy Atlantic. An RAF Poseidon P-8 surveillance jet, one of the UK's most advanced patrol aircraft, was cutting through the air. The mission was routine, keeping tabs on a specific ship they'd been tracking for hours. Standard stuff. But then, everything changed. Suddenly, the cockpit was filled with light. And I mean flooded. This wasn't a sun reflection or a navigation beacon. This was a deliberate, focused beam, absolutely blinding, fired right at their aircraft from the vessel below. The pilots threw their hands up, radio comms exploded, and that laser swept back across the cockpit windows, hunting for a target. This wasn't an accident. This was a hostile message. Within 48 hours, the UK Defense Secretary was standing in front of the cameras at Downing Street. His message was firm, precise, and impossible to misunderstand. We see you. We know exactly what you're doing. And if the Yantar moves south this week, we are ready to respond. So, who is the ship responsible for this shocking attack? It's the Yantar. Officially, it's a Russian auxiliary vessel, classified as an oceanographic research ship. But unofficially, this is one of Moscow's most valuable intelligence platforms, built for one thing: to map, monitor, and crucially, sabotage the undersea cables and infrastructure that power the entire modern world. And now, for the first time, it has used offensive lasers to blind British military pilots operating in their own waters. Let's unpack this. What actually happened? Who is behind it? And why is Britain now threatening military force over a ship that, according to its paperwork, just studies the seabed? The Yantar first entered service back in 2015, built in Kaliningrad. On the surface, it looks pretty unassuming, a 108-meter, white-hulled vessel with visible cranes, winches, and bays for launching submersibles. Its official name is Oceanographic Research Vessel. But every intelligence analyst in NATO knows the truth. The Yantar operates under the Russian Main Directorate for Deep Sea Research, known by the acronym GUJI. This is not a civilian group. GUJI is an elite, secretive division nested within the Russian Ministry of Defense. And its mission is anything but peaceful. As Defense Secretary John Healey put it, GUJI was purpose-built to undertake surveillance in peacetime and sabotage in conflict. The ship's hardware leaves no doubt that its capabilities back that claim up. And what makes the Yantar so terrifyingly effective? It's what it carries. This ship holds two specialized deep-diving submersibles, the AS-37 and AS-39. These aren't hobby subs. They can plunge to depths exceeding 6,000 meters. Think about that. That's deep enough to reach virtually any undersea cable or pipeline on the entire planet. On top of that, it's loaded with remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, ultra-sophisticated sonar, and sensor systems designed to map the ocean floor with crystal-clear precision. For years, Western intelligence agencies have been locked onto the Yantar, treating it like a ghost. They track it relentlessly as it lingers near the world's most critical infrastructure, those fragile undersea fiber optic cables, gas lines, and power connections. These are the literal digital arteries that carry 95% of all global internet traffic and trillions of dollars in daily financial transactions. If those lines go dark, the consequences are immediate and devastating. And this isn't some theoretical threat. In 2022, cables connecting the Shetland Islands to mainland Scotland were mysteriously damaged. Norway reported similar suspicious activity near Svalbard. And most recently, in October 2023, the subsea gas pipeline and telecom cable between Finland and Estonia was deliberately severed, and ACT investigators strongly suspect was intentional sabotage. The key connection? The Yantar has been spotted near every single one of those incidents. So, When that vessel popped up in UK waters a few weeks ago, the Royal Navy wasn't observing a harmless science trip. They saw an imminent threat. To truly grasp the gravity of this laser attack, you have to understand what's actually at risk. This isn't just about some wires on the seabed. It's about the entire foundational backbone of modern civilization. Right now, over 570 undersea cables crisscross our oceans. They handle everything you do: your streaming, your bank transfers, your Zoom calls, military communications, and the global stock market. It all relies on these. And here's the scary part. They are surprisingly easy to cut if you know where to look. Most cables sit in relatively shallow coastal waters, often less than 1,000 meters deep. A skilled submersible with the right tools could sever one in minutes. Hit the correct cables at the right moment, and you could bring entire countries offline. As an island nation, Britain is critically exposed. The UK is dependent on 60 undersea cables, connecting it to North America and Europe. Cut just a handful of those, and you're looking at instant, widespread chaos. That's why the Yantar's recent presence isn't just concerning, it's genuinely terrifying. Russian submersibles have already proven they can reach these vital lines. And let's be honest, Moscow has every incentive to gain leverage over the West. This isn't paranoia. It's a known, documented pattern of behavior. The UK is taking no chances. The laser incident happened sometime over the past month. The exact date is classified. What we do know is this. It marks the second time this year the Yantar has entered UK territorial waters north of Scotland. It was moving slowly, and its location transponder was either shut down or broadcasting false information. The Royal Navy's response was immediate and assertive. They dispatched HMS Somerset, a Type 22 frigate, to intercept the vessel. Cruising high above, an RAF Poseidon P-8 maritime patrol aircraft launched from RAF Lossiemouth. This plane is absolutely stacked with sensors, advanced radar, thermal imaging, and cameras designed to capture every single move the Yantar made. The Poseidon is a pivotal piece of the UK's surveillance puzzle. Built on the reliable Boeing 737 airframe, it's a subhunter and surface tracker rolled into one, capable of monitoring enormous swathes of the ocean. Its radar can spot objects on the surface from over 100 nautical miles away, and its cameras can zoom in close enough to identify individual crew members on the deck. For the crew aboard that Poseidon, the mission was supposed to be a total routine. Fly a preset pattern, keep visual contact, log the target's movements, and report home. Then came the lasers. Defense Secretary Healy called the incident deeply dangerous, but didn't elaborate on the type of laser involved. What we do know is that military-grade lasers, those designed to temporarily blind or disorient pilots, are becoming a terrifyingly common tool in gray zone warfare, the kind of conflict that exists just below the clear line of open, declared war. Under the traditional rules of engagement, naval ships tracking each other in peacetime maintain a respectful, safe distance, usually several hundred meters, to prevent misunderstandings. But this new, aggressive posture signals a significant shift. The UK is making it clear they are no longer content to simply watch from a distance. So, how does the Royal Navy actually track an elusive vessel like the Yantar? And what does it take to shadow a hostile ship in international waters without accidentally triggering a major conflict? Let's walk through the three-step process. Step 1. Detection. The UK maintains an intricate web of sensors, coastal radar stations, satellites, and submerged hydrophone arrays that can pick up surface ships and subs operating anywhere near British waters. When the Yantar moved into the North Sea this month, it was almost certainly detected long before it even reached the territorial boundary. Once the target is identified, the Royal Navy sends a vessel to establish visual confirmation. In this case, HMS Portland, a Type 23 frigate, was tasked with the mission. The Type 23 frigates are specialized anti-submarine warfare platforms, packed with towed sonar arrays, torpedoes, and a dedicated helicopter flight deck. While they hunt subs, they are also perfect for surface surveillance. They're fast, highly maneuverable, and carry cutting-edge sensors. The Portland would have closed in to within visual range of the Yantar, generally just a few hundred meters away, and started meticulously recording every detail: its speed, its heading, every course correction. All of this data is logged and transmitted back to the UK's Strategic Command Center in real time, providing the eyes in the sky as the Poseidon P-8. Its radar continually sweeps the surface, tracking not just the Yantar, but every vessel in the vicinity. Critically, its infrared cameras can detect thermal signatures, instantly revealing if the ship's engines are working hard, if submersibles are being deployed, or exactly where the crew is operating on deck. The Poseidon also has the capability to drop sonobuoys, small, floating sensors that listen for any activity beneath the waves. If the Yantar sends one of its deep-diving subs down, these buoys will track its movements, recording its depth, speed, and exact course. But here is the main sticking point, the core challenge of these operations. All of this takes place in international waters. Russia is legally allowed to be there. The UK is restricted to monitoring, recording, and shadowing. Unless the Yantar commits an undeniable hostile act, British forces are legally prevented from taking offensive action. That is the absolute most frustrating element of these surveillance missions. You are forced to play defense the entire time. The Yantar can go wherever it pleases, deploy whatever gear it wants, and as long as it doesn't physically cut a cable or fire a weapon, the Royal Navy can only watch and document. That is precisely why the laser incident is so massive. It obliterates that gray line. Using lasers to target a military aircraft is classified as a deliberately provocative act under international law, one that fully justifies a far stronger response. And that is exactly what the United Kingdom is now preparing to deliver. Russia's reaction was entirely predictable. The Russian embassy in London immediately issued a statement, dismissing Defense Secretary Healy's warnings as provocative and outright laughable. They stated, "Russia is not interested in British underwater communications. The actions of our country do not affect the interests of the UK and are not aimed at undermining its security." The embassy then took the offensive, accusing Britain of Russophobic hysteria and claiming that London's militaristic course was actually the thing, creating new dangerous situations. It's the classic, well-worn playbook: deny everything, deflect blame, and accuse the other side of being the true aggressor. But Western intelligence isn't buying it for a second. The Yantar's own operational history tells a very different, far darker story. Ship tracking data confirms the Yantar has spent the last year prowling the North Sea, the Baltic, and the waters directly around the British Isles. Just last month, it was escorted out of Dutch waters by the Netherlands Navy after being found near critical Dutch offshore infrastructure. Before that, it was tracked near UK-Norway undersea cables, near North Sea gas pipelines, and near the fiber optic links running between Scotland and Iceland. Each and every time, Moscow claimed it was just performing legitimate oceanographic research. And each time, NATO forces raised the alarm until the ship finally moved on. But the laser attack fundamentally changes the stakes. This wasn't passive observation, this was a hostile interference with a military operation. It strongly suggests that Russia is actively testing the threshold. How far can they push the envelope before the West is forced to respond with overwhelming force? So what happens next? As of this moment, the Yantar's exact location is unknown. So, where is the Yantar now? According to the last available tracking data, the ship stopped broadcasting its position on November 2nd. When it vanished, it was in the Baltic Sea, just north of Latvia. It has, quite literally, gone dark. However, flight tracking shows a persistent presence of RAF Poseidon P-8 aircraft relentlessly circling off the Scottish coast in recent days. This strongly suggests that even without the ship's transponder, British forces likely still have eyes on the vessel. The UK has drawn a clear red line. If the Yantar maneuvers south, toward more sensitive areas, specifically the critical undersea cable networks linking the UK to continental Europe, Britain has vowed to respond. The exact nature of that response is what military analysts are debating right now. They suggest several possibilities. Option 1, aggressive shadowing. Under new, tougher rules of engagement, Royal Navy frigates could close to within a mere 100 meters of the Yantar. At that range, any attempt to launch submersibles becomes extremely risky. The frigate's sonar would instantly detect any underwater movement, and its crew could visually monitor the Yantar's deck operations in real time. Option 2, Electronic countermeasures. The UK could actively employ jamming systems to interfere with the Yantar's navigation and communication equipment. This would effectively disrupt the ship's ability to coordinate with Moscow or effectively deploy its submersibles. Option 3. Direct interception. This is more aggressive. If the Yantar is caught actively deploying submersibles near vital infrastructure, the Royal Navy could deploy its own underwater assets, either specialist, diverse, or remotely operated vehicles, to physically block access or even attempt to recover any devices the Russians are trying to place. And then, there's what we could call the nuclear option. If the Yantar is caught in the act of sabotaging cables or pipelines, the UK could potentially authorize the use of force to disable the ship. This could involve knocking out its propulsion systems, jamming its control mechanisms, or, in the most extreme scenario, actually boarding the vessel. Now, let's keep this grounded in reality. A senior defense insider has already stated that it would be inconceivable for British vessels to open fire on the Yantar unless the provocation was absolutely catastrophic. And they are correct. Sinking a Russian ship in peacetime, even if caught red-handed near critical infrastructure, would be an instant act of war. It would hand Moscow the exact justification it needs to escalate the conflict further, whether through massive cyber attacks, energy cutoffs, or military action in another theater. But this doesn't mean Britain is powerless. There is a wide spectrum of options available short of opening fire that can render the Yantar's mission impossible. Aggressive, close-range shadowing, for example, when a Royal Navy frigate is sitting 100 meters off your stern with active sonar pinging constantly, it becomes practically impossible to deploy a submersible secretly. Electronic warfare is another clean way to fight. Jamming the Yantar's satellite comms, wiping out its GPS, or interfering with its control system could effectively blind the ship and force it to retreat. This is a high-stakes, underwater game of chicken, and the laser incident was just the opening move. And let's not forget the diplomatic angle. If Britain can definitively prove the Yantar was attempting sabotage, that evidence becomes a powerful tool. It could justify implementing even tougher sanctions, kicking out Russian diplomats, or even triggering NATO-wide action to restrict Russian vessels from operating in European waters. The takeaway here is crucial. Military force doesn't always involve missiles and torpedoes. Sometimes, the most effective response is one that stays just below the threshold of open war while simultaneously making the adversary's mission absolutely impossible to complete. This incident is not an isolated event. It's part of a much larger, clear pattern of heightened Russian aggression that has rapidly intensified since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Over the last 2 years, NATO has documented hundreds of Russian aircraft incursions into Allied airspace. Russian submarines have been caught operating near critical Atlantic cables, and Russian intelligence ships, like the Yantar, have been consistently tracked lingering around critical infrastructure all over Europe. In response, NATO has quietly and rapidly accelerated its undersea surveillance capabilities. The alliance has increased patrols in the North Sea and the Baltic, deployed new sonar arrays, and established special rapid response teams dedicated solely to protecting underwater infrastructure. Britain, specifically, has taken a leadership role, expanding the Royal Navy's submarine patrol areas, boosting cooperation on monitoring with allies like Norway and Denmark, and pouring investment into new technologies designed to detect and counter Russian submersibles. However, a deeper, more existential concern is driving all of this, and it goes beyond cables and pipelines. It's about deterrence. Russia understands it cannot win a conventional war against NATO. Its army is exhausted in Ukraine. Its economy is struggling under sanctions, and its traditional military power is no match for the combined strength of the alliance. But undersea infrastructure? That is their perfect vulnerability. A few carefully placed explosives on the right cables could cripple global financial markets, silence communications, and ignite chaos across the European continent. And the genius of it, from Moscow's perspective, is the deniability. Undersea sabotage is the ultimate gray zone weapon. It's destructive, destabilizing, and virtually impossible to prove. Cut a cable deep in the Atlantic, And by the time repair ships arrive, the evidence is gone. Was it Russia? An accident? Some other actor entirely? Proving it in a court of law or public opinion is incredibly difficult. That is why Britain's measured, yet firm, response to the Yantar is so fundamentally important. This action is about much more than shadowing one ship. It's about sending an unmistakable message to Moscow. Britain will not tolerate threats to its critical infrastructure, and any future provocations will be met with immediate and significant consequences. The UK is holding the line, and it is not alone in this fight. It's important to note that NATO is now coordinating incredibly closely on this underwater security threat. Allies like Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands have all significantly boosted their surveillance and patrols. There's even serious discussion about creating a dedicated NATO task force focused exclusively on protecting undersea infrastructure, moving this issue to the very top of the alliance's priority list. For decades, undersea cables were an afterthought. They were reliable. People took them for granted. Life just carried on. But as tensions with Russia have violently escalated, and as these sabotage incidents keep piling up, NATO has finally woken up to a terrifying reality. These cables are a critical vulnerability that must be defended. The looming question is whether this defense will be enough. Because Russia isn't the only threat here. China fields its own fleet of highly capable vessels built to map and monitor this infrastructure. Non-state actors, ranging from criminal organizations to terrorist groups, could theoretically target cables for ransom or widespread disruption. And let's not forget the sheer chaos of accidents. Fishing trawlers and ship anchors constantly damage these lines, protecting hundreds of thousands of kilometers of cables spread across the entire ocean. Floor is an absolutely monumental task. It demands relentless, 24/7 surveillance, lightning-fast response capabilities, and a level of international cooperation that has never been necessary before. And all of it hinges on one fundamental principle. If you threaten these cables, there will be consequences. That is the powerful, unambiguous message Britain is sending with its stance on the Yantar. And it's a message that needs to be heard loud and clear, not just in Moscow, but in every global capital that might be tempted to test the West's resolve. For the sailors aboard the HMS Portland, this is just another tour of duty. Track the Russian vessel, manage the potential crisis. But for the strategists and politicians in London, this is something far bigger. It is a defining test of resolve, a test of how far Britain is truly willing to go to defend its vital national interests in an age where the rules of engagement are rapidly shifting and conflicts are fought not with tanks and missiles, but with lasers, submersibles, and fragile cables operating in the deep, dark ocean. Defense Secretary Healey's warning, delivered at the close of his press conference, applies far beyond the single vessel. Our world is changing, he said. It is less predictable. It is more dangerous. He is absolutely right. And the frigid waters off Scotland are simply one front in a much larger struggle. This is the new face of conflict. It's not armies clashing on battlefields, but intelligence ships subtly shadowing each other in cold waters. It's not formal declarations of war, but lasers fired at aircraft and submersibles prowling near vital cables. It is warfare by inches. It's all a dizzying mix of provocation and response, escalation and restraint, playing out in this ill-defined gray zone where the operational rules are completely murky and the stakes are far higher than most people comprehend. The deeply uncomfortable truth is that we are definitely going to see more of this. As long as tensions between Russia and the West remain this high, as long as our critical undersea infrastructure is so vulnerable, and as long as ships like the Yantar are allowed to operate with relative impunity, these dangerous incidents will keep recurring. The real question is, will one of these incidents eventually cross that critical line from simple provocation to active conflict? Will one miscalculation, one overly aggressive maneuver, one fleeting moment of poor judgment turn a tense standoff into something far more serious? So, here is the question for all of you watching. If you had been the commanding officer that day, fully aware that the Yantar had just fired blinding lasers at your aircraft, what would you have done? Would you have immediately closed the distance and forced a confrontation to send a clear message? Or would you have held back, keeping the powder dry for a moment when the stakes were truly unavoidable? Would you have risked escalation to demonstrate unwavering resolve? Or would you have waited, meticulously documented everything, and left the final decision to the politicians? It is absolutely not an easy call, and honestly, there is no perfect answer. But that is the terrifying reality of modern naval operations. You are constantly forced to make split-second decisions with potentially massive international implications, always trying to balance strength with caution, aggression with necessary restraint. Drop your answer in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this one. Would you have pushed back harder, or would you have played it safe? And if you want to support this channel and help us bring more real maritime security stories like this to the surface, consider joining the fleet. You'll get loyalty badges, priority replies from me, and you'll be directly helping us keep these crucial stories coming. Just head to the channel page and hit that join button. Fair winds, sailors. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous battles are the ones that never quite make the headlines. I'll see you in the next one.